again today, tablet 5 of chapter 1 of Al-Khalid, which means to create. And we starting off of the Bureau, 19 times 6 is 114 verses, ayat, surahs. It stays low. The planet Tamat was a site used for excavating for things such as plutonium, chlorine, chlorophyll, ammonia, gold, platinum, and silver, as well as scanning the ocean floors for other elements that were beneficial to these beings and other planets. The mat is also used as a hunting ground for beings with intergalactically travel from planet to planet doing what was called planetary shopping. 5. Some of the planets in this galaxy that were most frequently visited because life exists there in various forms. 6. Lamu, meaning deity of war, now called Mars, and Kesha, meaning foremost of the firmament, now called Jupiter, and many others in the Arians, meaning skies or heaven. 6-star sun constellation. And Kima, meaning to be wealthy, which is the Pleiades constellation, and Aish, plowman, means to lend aid to help. Arcturus, as well as Clariton or Clarion, means clear, just to name a few. The boundless universe are filled with all kinds of life forms. On one of these routes, the planet craft Nibiru was making a routine trip, which was then on an orbit that took 1,104 short of an equinox of Earth's time, which is 5,920 years, called a P.I.M.P. In search of other planets that were rich in natural resources and minerals to take back to the planet they came from, it crashed. This great planet seas or planet-sized ship, Nibiru, came nearer to your solar system, traveling at the speed of light at 186,272 feet per second. It came from Ilion, the 19th galaxy, also called the Great Galaxy, known as the place on high, en route through the stars that took 25,920 years. This great ship Nibiru, as it was later known, was a mothership, and Nibiru held 12 smaller ships that were to be launched out from it. When the Bureau reached its destination, the Bureau was equipped with 4 separate atmospheres and 4 separate magnetic poles. 15. Nibiru has a crystal dome giving it the ability to break down light. 16. As well, it has solar panels of the size of a pen's head or less than that and can generate millions and millions of watts of energy. 17. As Nibiru passed by various suns or stations set up in the galaxy, Nibiru drew from them. 18. Nibiru was set up for holographic interdimensional transport and maimed over 144,000 crew members, headed by 4 and 20 elite beings called Yoayans, 12 agreeable and 12 disagreeable that stood 7 feet tall. However, on this flight, the craft Nibiru had first passed by the planet Ea, which means he whose house is water, and is now called Neptune, as it did many times before. The planet Ea, or Neptune, is a twin planet to the planet Anu, or Uranus. 21. By twin planet, I mean Neptune is very similar in some aspects, identical to the planet Uranus. The planet Uranus was originally called Shanama, the planet which is the devil. 22. The gases that make up the atmosphere of Ea, or Neptune, and Anu, the heavenly one, Uranus, are exactly the same. And the sizes of Ea, or Neptune, and Anu, Uranus, are similar. Their colors are identical and their rotational time is similar. The planet Anu, Uranus, practically rotates lying down. So the size, if looked at from the wrong angle, could surely be mistaken. As Nibiru came nearer to Ea, or Neptune, its gravitational pull caused electrical storms on that planet on that Friday afternoon at 1300 hours of Earth time, some 24 billion years ago, Earth time, and caused Nibiru to go slightly off its orbit. As the craft Nibiru passed by Ea, or Neptune, the planet Anu, Uranus came from behind the planet Neptune, and it caused the appearance of a bulge. As that bulge pulled on Neptune's orbit and caused the great ship Nibiru to begin to wallop on its orbit from fear of a crash. The planet Anu, or Uranus, was not originally seen in the solar system when Nibiru made his first visits. Its movement from behind Neptune caused Nibiru to veer off his own original path in order not to hit Anu and collide into another planet called Maldek. The original name for the planet Vulcan is Maldek. Maldek was between Leru, Mars, and Pisha, Jupiter. Maldek was 20 and 70,500 miles in diameter. Maldek had a population of billions living under the sea in the sub-cities of Kana and Vador. Maldek also has 2 moons. This was the planet of Mashmukia, or the troglodytes, the dragons, and voltex. The troglodytes' average height is 3.5 feet to 4 feet tall. Their heads are extremely large. The troglodytes have two round eyes without pupils and no ears or protruding nose, just two small holes in the nose area. Their mouths are a slit without lips. The troglodytes are hairless and have no teeth. The troglodytes' hands have four webbed fingers and no thumb. The troglodytes live totally underwater in great cities with many bioliths. Four ships equipped with high explosives created of plutonium from Maldek Starfleet called the Ninga managed to escape Maldek as Nibiru passed by and followed in Nibiru's path. Because they lived underwater, if the planet sped up, it wouldn't affect them. However, it was daylight, so most of the beings came on land. All of the beings that could have negotiated were dead. The only beings that survived were the ones under the seas, which were the military and the warriors who were looking for a chance to fight anyway. Nibiru had no way of contacting the beings of Meldeck to let them know that it was an accident and not an attack. Telepathic communication was forbidden to prevent interference by other telepathic disagreeable beings. This was because the Maldeckians were not a part of the Interplanetary Confederation. Their star fleet of warriors, a group of reptilians who bore the symbol of a reptile who called themselves Ninga, launched an attack. Thinking the planet Maldek had been attacked, four fighter ships of Ninga launched out, and these crafts from Maldek, as it went off its orbit into the universe, attacked with the intention of destroying Nibiru. Nibiru put up its four magnetic force field and destabilized the four attacking ships. Nibiru created the magnetic cube called the Kaba. These four ships called the Ninga fleet moved on as four powerful winds were trapped by Nibiru's force field and unable to break loose. Maldek is now referred to as the Lost Planet. The four fighter ships of the Ninja fleet are called the North Wind, South Wind, East Wind, and West Wind. These four fighter ships that originally surrounded Nibiru and appeared to launch an attack were now trapped. Nibiru, making one complete spin, threw them off into space. The great ship Nibiru activated its four magnetic force fields, incapacitating these ships. All of their controls and equipment ceased to function. A force field was put up and they were trapped in the environment of Nibiru. And its newly wobbly satellites were caught in Nibiru's gravitational pull and began to circle, making four whirlwinds. Nibiru immediately launched two ships to return to Ilium to inform the elders of the incident in case of the need of assistance. Nibiru proceeded on moving counterclockwise from the planets in this solar system. Nibiru pulled in towards Ansha, which means foremost of the heavens, now called Saturn, and kissed off the planet, which caused Nibiru to veer off its own orbit. The orbit that Nibiru was originally on was 25,920-year orbit called P.I.M.P. It shifted into a new orbit of 30 and 600 called a shard, 65. Then Nibiru bounced off the planet Titan that surrounds Ansha or Saturn and sped up its motion, creating the Saturn rings referred to as the necklace of Saturn. At this point, Bushmi or Plato was released from its natural orbit around the sun and was pulled away into the direction of Lamu or Mars and Lahamu, Venus. The path of Nibiru was now bent even more towards the center of the solar system, directly towards Tamat, which means mating of life and now called Earth. As it moved into your solar system, Nibiru caused problems amongst the other planets in this solar system by pulling their moons. One of the four satellites that came with Nibiru from Maldives, called the North Wind, was flying directly for Tamat. Upon the impact of the North Wind, it caused Tamat to split in two parts because of the high explosive that the ship contained called plutonium 72. The hole which the North Wind bore in Tamat caused the upper half of Tamat to wallop in its orbit, setting large portions of it on fire. The North Wind then came back around, shattering that half into pieces, making comets, flares of sun flares. This ball of light, now in the center of Tamat, was named Apsu, meaning one who exists from the beginning, and the place was named Ashur. Three satellites launched off Nibiru, creating a tetradome of energy at a 19.5-degree angle around the new half of Tamat, with the hole through it and a smaller sun, also called Apsu, was placed inside Tamat's center. Now, this newly formed planet, Tamat, now called P, was trapped in its orbit, protected by forces by the guidance of the ships while she healed herself. This 600-mile diameter sun called Apsu traveled through the great hole called the Abyss for a distance of 3,903 score and 3 miles to the center of the half of the planet Tamat, which the west wind bore a hole through, was now called P. So it was indeed one of the satellites of Nibiru for winds from Mount Jet that crashed into Tamat, not Nibiru itself. The vortex or troglodytes that made this ship that crashed survived and thrived in the sea of this new planet called P or Gia or Gia or even Gi, once called Tamat, which much later became known as Earth, starting the evolutionary process. This newly formed planet P was trapped in its orbit, protected by the forces, by the guidance of those four ships. Now, The last of the winds, the south wind, crashed into Key and created the Grand Canyon and gave birth to another small planet in its own orbit and rotation around this newly formed planet Key, which became Shesky, the moon, creating a lunar orbit. The upper half, which became oval shaped after the moon had broken away, was now even with 7,900 3 score and 6 miles in diameter, and 20 and 4 and 809 and 6 miles in circumference, and was set for replenishing or restoration on the part of the great star fleet responsible for its damage. Now this new planet has two suns, one in its belly, 3,903 miles from its surface, creating an inner tropical environment, and the other sun was 93 million miles away from the Earth's surface. He is now trapped in his new orbit around the outer sun to create a year of 365 days. Thus, a new time zone was created for this new planet. The south wind crashing into T.C.O.U.S.A also created black dust, a cloud that cut off Earth from the sun. So now we have two sets of planets separated by the asteroid belt, creating the inner and outer planets. The inner planets were Momo, Mercury, Lahamo, Venus, Key, Earth, Shesky, the moon, and Lahamo, Mars. The outer planets were Pisha, Jupiter, and Shah, Saturn, whose planet is Titan, Anu, Uranus, and Ea, Neptune, and now Gaga, Pluto, previously called Ushni, separated by the asteroid belt and the lost planet Maldives. So one half of the original T.C.O.U.S.A is an asteroid belt, and the other half is presently your planet called the Earth. But first, look at this. It's rotating.
UFOs, or as it's officially called, unidentified aerial phenomenon, UAPs. While we're waiting for the unclassified report from Congress on the matter, our guest, Lou Elizondo, the former director for AATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, has some answers. So excited to welcome you today, Lou. Thanks for joining us.
Jackie, it is my sincere pleasure to be with you and your audience today. Thank you very much for having me.
So I want to take us back for a second and set the table for this conversation. How exactly did you get assigned in the first place to investigate UFOs for the intelligence community?
Well, Jackie, quite frankly, I was voluntold. In essence, I had some prerequisite experience that they were looking for. At the time, the organization was fairly new, and they were looking for someone to create a counterintelligence and security portfolio. And I guess because of some of my background running investigations, counterintelligence investigations, and some of my background in technology protection, specifically with aerospace systems, that probably, I suspect, was a fairly lucrative skill set that they were looking for to create this sub portfolio under ATIP. And that's how I got into the program. I entered the program in 2008. I was asked by its director to come on board and establish this program. And then in 2010 is when I was asked to take over the effort.
And I'm sure many of you are well aware of this. If you are tuning in, you've probably watched the documentary that came out this year, The Phenomenon. Senator Harry Reid, which this doc outlines, got the program funded. Did you brief him in Congress on these unexplained pilot sightings when you were running the program?
Jackie, we provide many briefings, mostly through DoD and intelligence community leadership. That information was also provided to times to staffers and, of course, our elected officials. It's very important that when you're working in a national security construct that you try to follow the chain of command as much as possible. So a lot of my briefings were really to more senior level folks in the Department of Defense and within our intelligence architecture. But there were times, yes, that we would be asked to brief other officials, particularly in the legislative branch and in the executive branch as well.
And right now, everyone in Washington and really a lot of people around this country are hotly anticipating this unclassified government report on aerial phenomenon witnessed by Navy pilots. It's expected to be delivered to the Senate intelligence community by the Director of National Intelligence, hopefully by June 25th. The New York Times reported that senior administration officials who were briefed on the findings said that the unusual movements witnessed by pilots did not originate from American military or advanced U.S. government technology. But that's really about the only conclusive finding that has been so far teased from the report. What do you think the likelihood is that aerial phenomena are actually extraterrestrial spacecraft?
Well, Jackie, that's really the question, isn't it? The bottom line is up until very recently, there were really only three possibilities of what this could be. And the first possibility is that it is some sort of secret U.S. tech that somehow we have managed to keep secret even from ourselves for a long period of time. The second option is that it's some sort of foreign adversarial technology that has somehow managed to technologically leapfrog ahead of our country, despite having a fairly robust and comprehensive intelligence apparatus. And of course, the third option is something quite entirely different. It's a different paradigm completely. Now, as of this week, we now know through some of the discussions at senior level leadership that this report has definitively stated once and for all that it's not our technology. And that's hugely important. For 30 years, there has always been this undercurrent, if you will, these conspiracies that there was some sort of TR-3B program and some sort of super special technology that has been implemented, and we've been just been very careless about it. And I think that argument was finally put to bed this week. So that really only leaves two other options, and that's, again, it's foreign adversarial or it's something quite different. And I think we're now beginning to learn, as we've heard from the Director of National Intelligence, and I can certainly tell you from my experience, that we're pretty confident that it's not Russian or Chinese technology. There's several reasons for that if you like, I'm more than happy to go into.
Yeah, actually, could you go into that? I know you've explained it in previous interviews, but these sightings have happened for the past 70 years. And I know you've said before that you didn't think it was possible for one of our foreign adversaries, who have been helpful actually in providing information on this issue, would be capable of keeping something a secret for so long. Is that accurate?
That's precisely one of the counter arguments. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, as of today, we had an announcement by former Director of National Intelligence, Ratcliffe, who said this isn't Russian technology. And as we know, during Glasnost and the fall of the Berlin Wall, there was this 5-year romance period, if you will, between the United States and Russia, where we began really sharing a lot of information. And a lot of their, ironically enough, a lot of their UFO information wound up in our hands. And it turns out that they were experiencing the exact same issues from a UFO or a UAP issue perspective that we were. So if you look at really the timelines here, it's looking increasingly less likely that this is some sort of Russian technology. So that really leaves China. And some of these reports, you're absolutely correct, Jackie, they go back into the early 1950s and even earlier. And so what that says is that you have pilots, whether we're describing what we call a white flying Tic Tac or a white flying butane tank in the 1950s or a white flying lozenge, if you will, they're all describing the exact same vehicle, craft, if you will, doing exactly the same thing, performing in ways well beyond our current capabilities. And if you look at that from a temporal perspective, from a time perspective, it simply doesn't make sense that China back in 1950 would have this beyond next generation technology, mastered it, is able to fly it at will anywhere it wants on the face of the planet. And the last 70 years, despite the billions of dollars we put into our intelligence community infrastructure and architecture, it has managed to evade us. In fact, China is a country that has stolen quite a bit, spends a lot of time stealing technology from us. And so one has to ask the question that if really a country had this technology, would it be necessary to steal, much more basic technology from another country? Furthermore, if you had this type of technology, you probably wouldn't need to invest so much in military because you had this, if you will, checkmate type technology or capability where everything else now becomes obsolete. And so this goes to your last part of your question. Do I feel or do I believe this is, quote, extraterrestrial? Let me be very careful before I answer that by saying, at the end of the day, Jackie, it doesn't matter what I think or what I believe. What matters is what the data and the facts tell us. And from that perspective, it's very important that I had a very simple job, and that is to collect the truth and speak the truth. That's it. Very much as an investigator, which I used to be, we applied the same type of level of rigor and methodologies we did in hunting terrorists and spies as we did in hunting UFOs. So we really didn't care what these were. We were just trying to get to the bottom of what they were. And so therein lies, if you will, a little bit of our approach. We were very agnostic, if you will, or objective about this topic and tried to allow the facts to lead us down a certain path. And that is really what we're doing today. What we're realizing is that the facts are painting a far more compelling picture than what we thought. In this case, your audience, they're the jury. So what matters is really what you think about this. And so the hope here is that the U.S. government can provide the data and the evidence and the information, and then allow the American people to decide what we think this is about. I think, if I may just digress for a moment here, you mentioned something very interesting that a lot of people want to talk about and say, is this extraterrestrial? And I want to just, if I can, for just briefly delve into where we are with modern day science. We are human beings that a lot of now people in psychology refer to as cardiosocial animals. It means we look at things in extremes because for the first 9 months of our existence, we were in our mother's womb and we heard that binary heartbeat of our mother. And so we tend to look at the life, if you will, in our universe in that binary way. It's either good or it's bad, it's hot or cold, black or white, up and down. And that's how we tend to judge things. But in reality, the universe and physics isn't binary. It's not binary at all. In fact, there's all sorts of options and opportunities of what this could be. So again, back to your question, is it from here or is it from out there? We don't really know. In fact, there's lots of other options on the table. It could be from, as I've said before, it can be from outer space, inner space, or the space in between. As we begin to learn what quantum physics is, and we begin to understand our place here on this little planet, we begin to realize that there's a lot of other options. We judge the universe in 5 fundamental senses, the ways that we perceive the universe, and that's touch, taste, hear, smell, etc. And if you can't use those senses to look at something or measure it, then we really can't interact with it. And yet we know the majority of the universe around us, 99% of it, in fact, is not perceivable. There are right now Wi-Fi signals coursing through your body. There's cosmic radiation coming in from the cosmos. There's neutrinos coming in from the sun. There's radar hitting you from the local airport. And yet these are all realities, and you can't interact with it because we just don't have the tools to do so. take a beautiful night sky, look at the stars, and you might say, wow, that's really a pretty sky. But if you now take a radio telescope and look at that same spot in the sky, all of a sudden you begin to see things that you couldn't see before. You see in the ultraviolet, you see in the infrared spectrum, you see nebula. So I guess my long-winded point to all this is that we must keep all options open. If we already know that 99% of the universe we cannot perceive or interact with, then there may be other options here. This may not necessarily be something from outer space. In fact, this could be something as natural to our very own planet as us. We're just now at a point where we're beginning to technologically be able to interact and collect data. This could be something from under the oceans. This could be something from outer space. We really don't know. And this is why I think we really need to take a whole of government approach and look at this, because it is day by day, it's seeming like more and more this conversation is shifting from a human technology, quite possibly, we don't know for sure yet, but to something far more profound.
But as someone who is more steeped and in the know on the data and the facts, do you have any more narrow idea in that 99% of things that we are unaware of what this could be exactly?
You know, through observations, we are quite convinced that we're dealing with a technology that is multi-generational, several generations ahead of what we consider next generation technology. So what we consider beyond next generation technology, something that could be anywhere between 50 to 1,000 years ahead of us. And for us, I think it's when you're looking at the observations and these things, how they can outperform, frankly, anything that we have in our inventory, and we're pretty certain anything that our foreign adversaries have in our inventory, then yes, obviously, as human beings, we tend to go down that rabbit hole of speculation. I want to be very careful that I don't offer my opinion in an unqualified manner. I've always stated this is exactly why we need a UAP task force. In fact, this is why we need a much bigger whole of government enduring capability, because at the end of the day, we don't know what we're dealing with. And frankly, all options have to be on the table until they're no longer on the table. I could offer you my opinion right now, but Jackie, in all honesty, it would probably be a bit of disservice, because we frankly don't have enough information yet. We're just now getting to the point as a government, as a society, that we are accepting the reality that this is real, whatever it is. I think we need to do a little bit more. And so out of respect to you and your journalistic integrity and that to your audience, I'm probably going to refrain from offering more of my opinion on that particular aspect, only because the one thing I've learned in intelligence is you can be absolutely sure of something and still be absolutely wrong. And I don't want to mislead anybody.
I'm going to be a little bit of a pest here, and I apologize for my desire for a more black and white answer, but in common parlance, I guess, is that something that you would refer to as an alien or a time traveler? Is there any sort of way you could, more specifically characterize this?
Yeah, I've said before, this is something, and I guess I may have just said it again, but that this could be something from outer space, inner space, or frankly, the space in between. There's a lot of options out there. This could be something that is extra or hyperdimensional. Now, I don't mean extra dimensional in a woo-woo sense. I mean extra dimensional in a quantum physics sense. We know that the universe is full of shortcuts and loopholes. We know that, so if I may backtrack for just a moment. It took the Renaissance to come to the point where we understand Newtonian physics. We understand what gravity looks like. We still don't quite understand what it is yet, but we understand what it looks like. And we understand force equals mass times acceleration and whatnot. So we have these really elegant solutions for our observations of the natural world. And then it took a couple hundred years, but along comes some cat with crazy hair we call Einstein, who now introduces the notion of relativity and kind of upends really science and turns it 180 degrees and says, well, actually, there's a thing called space-time, and space and time are actually connected, and they're also stretchable and compressible. And as bizarre as that may be, that is precisely what we're seeing. And so space-time can be warped based upon mass or a lot of energy. And then, of course, 40 some years ago, we really start getting into this whole nother paradigm of science. and it's quantum physics. And someone once described it as you have this box sitting on the ground, and in walks a dog, and all of a sudden 2 cats walk out. And as crazy as that may seem, that's precisely what we're seeing in these observations with quantum physics, proverbially speaking, of course. So it doesn't make sense, and yet there's this weird duality. Maybe the universe, the speed of light, although maybe the universal speed limit, there may be some shortcuts and off ramps in this understanding of our universe. So we are just now scratching the surface of understanding what type of science it may take to do what we are seeing with these vehicles. There's 5 specific observables associated with these UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, that really separate them from the rest of anything that we would consider terrestrial aircraft or manned aircraft or some type of human-based technology. And again, I want to be careful not to go too far out on the limb, because that's where the speculation starts, and that's also where the danger starts, because we simply don't know yet.
Well, and I guess the other key question here is, what do you think the likelihood is that the U.S. government is actually going to confirm anything?
Jackie, I think I lost you, but I'm going to go ahead and try to answer the best I can. I think you were asking me what the likelihood is of the U.S. government going ahead and confirming anything in this 180-day report. So let me see if I can go ahead and answer that. Hopefully that was your question, because I seem to have lost signal. So the 180-day report is, first of all, not substantial enough time to do a comprehensive report. In fact, I've told people it takes longer to remodel a household kitchen sometimes than it does to take 180 days to conduct one of these 180-day reports. Secondly, there's the other issue here that we had COVID and this pandemic that kept a lot of people home for most of that time. And then thirdly, I think if this turns out to be some sort of adversarial technology that has happened to leapfrog ahead of us for the last 7 years, Jackie, we're talking about one of the greatest intelligence failures this country has ever seen, probably eclipsing 9/11 by an order of magnitude. It took us nearly 3 years to come up with a 9/11 Commission's report. If this turns out to be some sort of adversarial technology that did happen to technologically leapfrog us, 180 days, I don't think it's going to be sufficient. I think what we can expect the report to say is something like this. There are about 100 and some odd cases out there that are compelling enough that they are definitely displaying some sort of capability, technology that we don't have. Secondly, we don't know what these things are. We have no evidence to suggest that they are from outer space, but at the same time, we have no evidence to suggest that they're not. And so this report will probably be a bit of a placeholder. The one thing we know for sure at this point is that it's not U.S. secret technology. So that takes part of the 30-year argument that this is some sort of secret Air Force, if you will, weapon platform being tested. That's now off the table. And so now we can focus more, I think, on the foreign adversarial perspective, or hopefully maybe something on something, quite frankly, sufficiently different than anything that we had possibly considered before.
And when we're actually talking about this as a national security threat or as a foreign adversarial threat, as you just mentioned, I think we need to talk about China here, which the United States government also views as a national security threat. And China is making big investments at the moment to identify extraterrestrial life as a part of their military mission. There's discussion within the community about whether it's better for us to lead the way with confirmation versus China doing so, and possibly being dishonest about what they found. Essentially, a new modern-day space race. Do you think, in your opinion, does it matter which national takes the lead on confirming the presence of extraterrestrial life, and who gets to the bottom of this answer first?
I think, well, you're right, Jackie. Not only that, they've just announced they've established a new UAP task force similar to ours, and they're using artificial intelligence to do this. We also know that there's a play by them to try to lead this conversation at the United Nations. That, for me, it's a multifaceted question you're asking me. There's two parts of me, and I'm a little bit, I guess you'd say, schizophrenic about the response. There is the national security side of me that has said always, we have these adversaries, these traditional adversaries, and they're going to steal everything they can from us. We should don't trust them, try to cooperate, but don't trust them. But then there's the other side, which is the non-governmental side of me that tends to be a little bit more optimistic. And perhaps this is an opportunity for our countries, rather than to find disagreement, maybe to find some sort of common ground. Maybe this may be a new renaissance.